When King Charles stood before his closest advisors in a dimly lit chamber of Buckingham Palace, no one expected the words that followed. In a single breath, centuries of royal tradition shattered. The Crown Estate, one of Britain's most sacred holdings, was no longer destined for the reigning monarch, but for Prince William, effective immediately. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Gasps were stifled behind closed doors. The royal bloodline had always treated the Crown Estate as a sovereign inheritance, not a personal gift. For Charles to break that chain, to bypass protocol, and to hand it directly to his son while still on the throne, wasn't just unorthodox, it was revolutionary. Within moments of the statement, aides were seen rushing through the palace corridors, faces pale, whispers urgent. Legal advisors, summoned without delay, pored over constitutional documents with trembling hands, knowing full well that history had been rewritten in the span of a few words. The king's voice had been calm, measured, but the implications were seismic. Outside the private walls, the royal household was reeling. The estate, valued in the billions, controls vast portions of land, property, and prestige tied for centuries to the very authority of the crown. For it to change hands mid-reign was virtually unheard of. The media, catching scent of the story through whispered leaks, exploded with speculation. Palace speechless, the headlines blared. Royal commentators scrambled to interpret the gravity of what had just occurred. But perhaps most telling of all was the eerie silence from those closest to the throne, particularly Queen Camilla. Camilla, often poised and composed in the face of chaos, reportedly went pale the moment the news reached her. According to insiders, she wasn't just uninformed, she was deliberately excluded from the inner circle that crafted the move. Her expression, described by one witness as ashen and unreadable, barely masked the fury bubbling beneath the surface. Some claim she left the room without a word. Others say she whispered something to an aide before disappearing into her private suite, where doors remained closed for hours, and then came the questions. Why now? Why William? And most of all, why in secrecy? William, curiously, had not been present at the announcement, a choice that did not go unnoticed by those inside or outside the palace. Was it strategic, a sign of hesitation, or had he been blindsided as well? Rumours clashed in royal hallways. Some suggested this was a move by Charles to secure his son's future amid internal instability. Others whispered darker theories that this was less about legacy and more about control. Amid the chaos, palace aides were left scrambling, phones ringing off the hook with inquiries from parliamentarians, legal firms, and even foreign embassies. The implications stretched beyond royal tradition, touching on national property laws, diplomatic estates, and public perception. Yet through it all, Buckingham Palace released only a single statement: His Majesty has made a decision in line with his vision for the continuity of the crown. Cold, calculated, final. But what would possess a reigning monarch to surrender the very heart of his power? The answer lies in a hidden storm brewing within the royal household. 3 weeks before the bombshell declaration, a covert meeting was held behind the heavy oak doors of Windsor's private drawing room. Attendance was limited, notes were burned, and staff were dismissed. What emerged from that gathering was the blueprint for a move no king had dared before. The silence surrounding that night was deafening, but within the walls of Windsor, something seismic was quietly taking shape. King Charles, aware that the sands of loyalty were shifting beneath his feet, summoned only those he trusted beyond reproach. Camilla, Anne, and Andrew, figures once central to strategic matters, were nowhere to be found. Their absence wasn't an oversight, it was deliberate. This meeting wasn't for the old guard, it was for those preparing to forge a new future. At the centre of this operation stood the Duke of Edinburgh, whose re-emergence in royal strategy caught many off guard. His posture, once withdrawn after decades in the background, had hardened into something resolute. And then came the moment that no one expected. Princess Catherine arrived, unannounced, ushered in quietly but unmistakably. Her presence was no mere courtesy. Those in the room felt it instantly. This wasn't about the family anymore. This was about legacy, public trust, and the survival of the monarchy's relevance in a rapidly changing world. She didn't speak much, but when she did, her words were sharp, precise, and cutting through the centuries-old fog that had long surrounded royal landholdings. Legal minds, hand-picked by Charles himself, opened ancient volumes and confidential files. Could the crown estate be partially separated from the monarch's sitting authority without dissolving its symbolic weight? Could William inherit control without technically ascending the throne? Every question danced between law and legacy. Behind it all loomed the unspoken truth. Camilla's growing influence over traditional assets had begun to stir discontent. Her name, though unspoken, lingered in the room like a shadow. Some feared her vision for the monarchy leaned too far into modernity, threatening to sever the delicate tether between history and identity. Others believed she was consolidating too much, too fast. And what of William? Though not present at the initial gathering, his voice echoed through the deliberations. "I don't want to divide the family," he had told Charles in a tense conversation days earlier. His hesitance, deeply personal, stemmed from a place of loyalty, but also burden. He knew what it meant to inherit something not through time, but through choice. It was a crown of land and influence, not gold, but heavy just the same. The whispers of his reluctance only fueled Charles's urgency. If William wouldn't take it later, he must take it now before the tides turned against them both. In the hours that followed, decisions were made with more silence than speech. The final plan wasn't drafted on paper, but memorized, embedded, and sealed within the trust of a few. They understood that this act would not be unveiled through royal pageantry, but through precision and shock. It had to be irreversible before it was even announced. And so, as the wind howled outside Windsor Castle that night, a different storm was being crafted inside, quiet, contained, and devastating in its power. As Windsor kept its silence, another storm began to swell, this time from those who were deliberately left out of the conversation. Insiders claim Camilla erupted in a storm of rage upon hearing the news. Her voice, reportedly shaking the palace halls, called the move an unthinkable betrayal. This wasn't just about property, it was about power. And for Camilla, the war for the throne had just turned personal. Only hours before the press release, she was informed without ceremony, without consultation, and without even the courtesy of warning. The moment the words left the advisor's lips, her expression is said to have shifted from confusion to something far darker. Those closest to her described the queen consort as trembling with fury, eyes cold and voice rising above the whispers of disbelief. It was a decision that didn't just bypass her, it undercut her entirely. She hadn't merely been excluded from a transaction, she had been exiled from influence. Within minutes, she confronted Charles. The confrontation was not quiet. Palace walls, long used to absorbing the chaos of succession, weren't ready for this. Camilla, always calculating, now burned with indignation. She is said to have accused her husband of betrayal, not just of her, but of the crown itself. "You've committed treason against the sovereign spirit," she allegedly shouted, echoing words no consort had dared utter in modern royal history. Charles, unmoved, stood firm. He didn't flinch, didn't retreat. He listened, and when she finished, offered no apology. According to a palace aide who overheard part of the exchange, his only response was a cold, "It had to be done." And just like that, the last thread of unity between them began to unravel. Behind the fury was something deeper, fear. Camilla understood what the estate meant, not just in title, but in sway. Whoever controlled the crown estate controlled the future flow of royal priorities, influence over national relationships, and the symbolic pulse of authority. By giving it to William, Charles had not just given away property, he had handed over a kingdom in waiting. Camilla had fought tooth and nail for her place. She had endured years of criticism, navigated scandals, and shaped her own version of the monarchy. But with one stroke of ink, her power had been reduced to formality. Whispers within the palace grew louder. Tensions between Camilla and the Waleses, already strained, now turned ice cold. Catherine, once regarded with a mix of politeness and distance by Camilla, was now viewed as an adversary. William, who had kept his emotions tightly guarded, refused to engage directly. Their public appearances together were minimal, their private interactions virtually non-existent. And as those invisible lines hardened, Camilla retreated not out of defeat, but to recalibrate. Events were abruptly cancelled. Scheduled interviews disappeared from the royal calendar. Orders were issued to press offices to block certain media access, and aides were instructed not to comment on internal family transitions. The Queen Consort was drawing her own battle lines, silently, strategically, but the world outside wasn't waiting. While Camilla closed her doors and licked her wounds, the rest of the royal family began to stir. Because while one power center recoiled, another began to rise. And in the shadows of this upheaval, someone once disgraced and discounted, began maneuvering with chilling intent. As Camilla retreated behind locked doors, others within the family began making quiet moves of their own, especially one prince with a long memory and an even longer grudge. For Prince Andrew, the chaos opened an unexpected door, stripped of titles, yes, but not of ambition. And in the shadows of this royal upheaval, Andrew made his boldest maneuver since his fall from grace. The crown estate transfer didn't just catch the palace off guard, it created a temporary vacuum of control. And Andrew, once disgraced and removed from public duties, sensed something few others did: vulnerability. The monarchy was fractured, the lines of succession muddied, and the public narrative dominated by surprise and suspicion. In that uncertain space, Andrew moved not in defiance but in strategy. He knew that silence from the top left space for whispers, and whispers could be weaponized. He began by quietly contacting former estate advisors, men and women he had worked with during his earlier years, back when he still held a semblance of influence. The approach wasn't official. It was discreet, even charming. Purely hypothetical, he framed it, but they knew better. Those conversations weren't idle curiosity. They were probes. Andrew wanted to know what levers still existed, who still answered his calls, which hands would be willing to shake his in the dark. His inquiries weren't about land valuations or historical stewardship, they were about access, optics, and authority. If William's control of the estate could be painted as reckless or destabilizing, Andrew believed he could offer himself as a safer pair of hands. Simultaneously, he reached beyond Britain. Former contacts in foreign diplomatic circles, particularly those with ties to real estate developments and joint ventures tied to crown properties, began receiving subtle messages. Some were old acquaintances, others were former allies with unfinished business. But Andrew's message was clear: don't count me out. He positioned himself as a hidden asset and insider, with the instincts and pedigree to protect old relationships, while new leadership found its footing. He wasn't seeking headlines, he was reshaping perception, one quiet alliance at a time. Then came the reported meetings in York. They were never officially acknowledged, but sources confirmed movement: quiet arrivals, unmarked cars, late-night discussions. The topic: reclamation. Andrew was allegedly building a narrative, one where he, not William, understood the soul of the institute. Ion. He began framing William as inexperienced, overly reliant on Catherine, and vulnerable to public mood swings. Within private conversations, he painted himself as the guardian of stability, someone with scars, yes, but wisdom earned through fire. To some of the older royal courtiers, those nostalgic for a different era, it struck a chord. And yet, beneath it all was a darker motive. One insider revealed Andrew's true obsession: undermining William, not out of jealousy but out of a deep resentment rooted in the belief that he had been cast aside too quickly. The estate's transfer to William was, to Andrew, a final insult, one that had to be answered not through confrontation, but through erosion. If he couldn't reverse the decision, he would chip away at its foundation until it cracked under pressure. He didn't need a crown, he needed relevance. And relevance in a monarchy under siege was just as dangerous as power. But as Andrew plotted, the one man at the center of it all, Prince William, remained silent. Until now. When William finally addressed the nation, his words were carefully chosen, but the pain behind them was unmistakable. "I didn't ask for this," he confessed. Yet the burden now rested on his shoulders, and history was watching. The moment the broadcast began, a chilling quiet fell across the United Kingdom. Not out of obligation, but out of anticipation. William's voice, steady yet strained, spoke volumes beyond the script. There was humility in his tone, and the weight of legacy pressed against every word. He did not present himself as a victor or a prince. Elevated, he stood before the world as a man caught between duty and fracture, a son trying to hold a kingdom together as it pulled at its seams. He began by acknowledging what no royal had dared to admit publicly in generations: the divisions within the family. He made no effort to mask the reality. "We are not without our struggles," he said, pausing, letting the truth settle in. Yet despite the cracks, he vowed to preserve the legacy with integrity, to carry the crown estate not as a prize but as a trust. Viewers were stunned not by grand proclamations, but by the vulnerability. Body language experts later dissected every flicker of his gaze, every tightening of his jaw. They saw the internal conflict, the emotional toll. His fists, subtly clenched at times, betrayed an unease rarely visible in royal addresses. This wasn't rehearsed confidence, it was reluctant acceptance. Beside him, Catherine remained composed, silent, but resolute. She didn't need to speak. Her presence was its own declaration. In the storm that had surrounded the royal family, she had become the one constant, the stabilizer. Her proximity to William during this moment was no accident. It was a deliberate symbol of solidarity. And yet, behind the scenes, questions swirled. Had William wanted this responsibility? Or had he been cornered by forces too powerful to resist? Some insiders believed the king had left him little choice. One aide anonymously claimed Charles had made it clear, "Either you accept this now, or the monarchy slips away from us both." The timing of the speech, the language, the urgency, it all suggested that the move wasn't as voluntary as it appeared. Whispers hinted that William had been hesitant until the 11th hour, torn between preserving family bonds and assuming a role that would irreversibly shift the power dynamic within the royal circle. The fact that he accepted, despite the emotional cost, painted him not just as a prince, but as a man stepping into fire for the sake of something larger than himself. Yet even as he tried to calm the narrative, he knew the waves had already begun to surge, for while William's words offered a glimpse of calm and stability, there was an undeniable hum beneath the surface, a machinery within the monarchy that had already begun grinding forward. And somewhere deep within the vaults of royal memory, someone was quietly unraveling the past, looking for answers, justifying decisions, and perhaps revealing the very truth that had pushed the king to this moment in the first place. While William offered calm, beneath the surface, the machinery of the monarchy was grinding, and someone was quietly unraveling the past to understand the king's motives. Buried in the royal archives was a sealed envelope marked to be opened in the event of structural transition. It was Queen Elizabeth's voice from beyond the grave, and what it revealed could explain everything. The envelope, untouched for years, had sat hidden within a secure drawer inside her private Balmoral safe, guarded not by staff but by time and intention. Its existence was known to only a handful, and its contents were never discussed. But when the tensions within the royal household began reaching dangerous levels, when Camilla's influence swelled and William's role became the unspoken battlefield, Charles finally turned the key. What he found inside wasn't instruction, it was confession. The letter wasn't addressed to the nation nor to the monarchy as an institution. It was personal, intimate, and written in the Queen's unmistakable hand. She spoke not as a sovereign, but as a woman who had lived through war, scandal, triumph, and heartbreak. She wrote of sleepless nights and the weight of the crown, of her fears that the monarchy, if left too rigid, would fracture beneath the expectations of a modern world. Public trust, she warned, could vanish in an instant. Legacy, once shattered, could not be reassembled. And in a chilling passage, she acknowledged the very conflict now tearing the royal family apart. Elizabeth spoke candidly about the state. She called it the soul of the monarchy's presence, but warned that its future could not be tethered to tradition alone. "We must allow it to move with the times," she wrote, "to evolve, even if that means loosening our grip." She expressed deep concern over the internal power struggles she sensed would emerge after her death. Though names were omitted, the implications were sharp. One passage, underlined in ink, read, "If there comes a time when unity is strained and structure must shift, William shall be the rightful guardian of heritage, not because of title, but because of instinct. At one sentence, insiders say, changed everything for Charles. The king, already tormented by division and betrayal, was reportedly shaken to the core. A palace aide claimed he stayed alone in the study for hours after reading the letter, declining all calls and visitors. It is said he reread the final paragraph aloud slowly, as if trying to absorb its full meaning. And then he wept, not out of weakness, but because in those words he found clarity. The decision to transfer the crown estate was no longer his alone. It was, in his mind, a continuation of his mother's final will, one that had remained hidden until it was most needed. The letter was never made public, but whispers of its existence began to leak through the cracks. Some claimed it was fabricated, a tool to justify Charles's bold move. Others believed it was the most honest moment of royal vulnerability since the abdication crisis. But no one could deny the effect it had. It explained the haste, the secrecy, the pain behind William's eyes during his speech. It also cast a new light on Catherine's quiet emergence at the heart of palace strategy. If Elizabeth had placed her trust in William, then the people were watching to see what that trust would yield. But even as Elizabeth's voice guided the path forward, another figure was quietly building a legacy of her own far from the shadows. While the palace battled storms of succession, one woman stood unshaken. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, moved not with fanfare but with precision, and insiders say her influence over this crown estate transfer ran far deeper than anyone realized. As public tempers flared and the royal house fractured behind its stone facade, Catherine remained a pillar of composure. Not a single press statement bore her name, not one direct comment was uttered, but her handprints were all over the unfolding drama. Unlike those who sought control through dominance, Catherine operated through restraint, understanding that silence, when calculated, could echo louder than scandal. While others played visible chess, she orchestrated strategy from the quietest corners of the palace. Behind closed doors, Catherine became a trusted advisor to the very legal teams shaping the narrative of the Crown Estate's seismic handover. Her counsel wasn't about law, it was about perception. What would the public accept? How could tradition evolve without shattering faith? She posed the questions others were afraid to ask. Those who entered these sessions expecting a ceremonial figure left recognizing her as something else entirely, an architect of message, mood, and monarchy. Her approach was never combative, but it was deliberate. She knew what was at stake, not just a transfer of power, but the emotional weight of royal symbolism in the modern age. While the monarchy shook on its foundations, Catherine quietly strengthened its core. She arranged confidential meetings with heritage charities tied to the Crown Estate, ensuring continuity and calming fears. She asked about history, sustainability, generational stewardship. To some, it seemed performative. But to those in the room, her sincerity was undeniable. She wasn't just protecting the monarchy, she was redefining its heart. In every meeting, she avoided titles, ignored rank, and focused instead on long-term trust. That trust, once scarce, soon blossomed around her. Meanwhile, the media buzzed with conjecture. Was Catherine secretly behind the estate handover? Was she maneuvering against Camilla? The rumors intensified, but she refused to engage. No public rebuttal, no clarifications, just quiet presence. And yet, even in that silence, her influence expanded. Palace staff began referring to her as the ghost architect of the estate's future, a phrase that both unnerved and inspired those who heard it. She wasn't demanding loyalty, she was earning it. Perhaps most surprising was the effect her rise had on those who had once dismissed her. Within certain royal circles, especially among Camilla's loyalists, Catherine had long been viewed as too polished, too predictable. But now, those very circles whispered in discomfort. Her ability to move policy without spectacle, to command without confrontation, had altered the hierarchy beneath their feet. She had stepped into a realm of influence few had ever imagined she would reach, and done so without breaking stride. As her stature grew, another figure felt the tremors of loss beneath her. Because as Catherine quietly rose, Another woman's world began to crumble, and with it, a final confrontation erupted behind the palace's oldest doors. In an emotionally charged midnight confrontation, Queen Camilla allegedly demanded Charles revoke the estate transfer. What followed was a tear-stained clash of loyalty, fear, and unspoken truths that shook the very foundation of their marriage. The confrontation, which took place deep within the private quarters of Clarence House, was neither scheduled nor quiet. Camilla entered the room with fury she had long buried beneath poise, and Charles, already weathered from weeks of internal conflict, stood ready but weary. According to palace staff stationed nearby, the voices rose quickly. There were no formalities, no courtesies, just raw emotion laid bare between a king and a queen who, for the first time, stood on opposing sides of monarchy's future. Camilla's accusations struck hard. She accused Charles of betrayal not just to her, but to the crown they were supposed to share. She is said to have shouted, "You've chosen the people over your queen." It was a moment of devastating clarity. To Camilla, this was not about land or logistics. It was about love, loyalty, and legacy. She had stood beside Charles through scandal and exile, through years of judgment and whispers, and now, in her eyes, he had undermined her place in history without a second thought. But Charles was unyielding. The king, whose decisions were so often clouded by sentiment, stood firm. He invoked his mother's letter, the sealed directive from Queen Elizabeth herself, and declared that the choice had already been made long before Camilla entered the conversation. The clash wasn't private for long. Long-serving staff overheard fragments of the argument, and the air was thick with tension long after Camilla stormed out. Some said her threats echoed down the corridor. Rumors quickly spread that she had threatened to step back indefinitely from her royal duties, calling her role ceremonial, now redundant. Charles, for his part, remained composed on the outside, but internally, sources say he was devastated. Yet he did not budge. He allegedly replied with chilling finality, "Then do what you must." It wasn't a dismissal, it was surrender. He had chosen his path, and no crown, no queen, no compromise would undo it. The aftermath was immediate. Scheduled appearances were cancelled, public engagements quietly pulled. No official comment came from Buckingham Palace, but Clarence House issued a brief, pointed statement that sparked further speculation. It read only, "Their Majesties are entering a period of reflection," a phrase so carefully worded, yet so thunderous in implication. It didn't deny the crisis, it confirmed it. The marriage that had defied decades of public scorn now stood at the mercy of a private reckoning. And yet, behind the heartbreak and heated words, the world outside was moving forward. The estate had already transferred. Signature S had been inked. Legal gates had closed. Whatever rift had opened between Charles and Camilla, the consequences of his choice were no longer theoretical, they were structural, irrevocable. The storm within the palace could rage on, but the machinery of the monarchy had shifted into a new rhythm, one led by different hands and a future neither could fully control. But even as emotions boiled over behind closed doors, the Crown estate had already shifted, and its implications were just beginning to be understood. The transfer was more than symbolic. With the Crown estate in William's hands, a new era begins, one shaped not by inheritance, but by deliberate choice. The monarchy, once bound by rigidity, now walks a dangerous yet promising new path. In the wake of the decision, every corner of the royal institution felt the tremors. This wasn't simply a father passing a legacy to his son. It was the reprogramming of royal succession itself. William now presides not as an heir, but as a governor of the monarchy's most powerful asset. The traditional line of waiting had been upended. In its place stood a model of forward leadership, guided by trust, timing, and transformation. The implications stretch far beyond real estate. With this move, succession planning has been redefined. No longer must the Crown's authority be a prize received at the twilight of a monarch's life. Now it can be delegated, distributed, realigned based on vision rather than age. This shift signals something deeper within the royal core, a slow but steady pivot toward a younger, more adaptive model of monarchy, one that prioritizes relevance over reverence, where symbolic relics of empire are reassigned to those deemed capable, not merely born into position. William didn't just receive power, he was chosen to shape it, but as he rises, a quiet question lingers in the corridors of Buckingham Palace. What becomes of Charles? No abdication has occurred, yet his decision to hand over control of the estate casts his role in a new, uncertain light. Is he now a transitional figure, a guiding monarch in the background, or has he redefined his own reign into something advisory, perhaps even preparatory for the new leadership to come? Royal watchers have begun dissecting every step, every absence, every silence. And in that analysis, Camilla's presence, or lack thereof, has drawn even more scrutiny. Once central, her influence now appears diminished. Public events featuring her have become increasingly rare. Statements once issued in her name now flow only from broader royal channels. It is clear the spotlight has moved, and it's not looking back. Meanwhile, William's public image has soared. Polling suggests a sharp rise in approval ratings, with many citizens praising his quiet strength and decisive embrace of responsibility. For a generation that has long questioned the monarchy's place in a modern world, this single act, the voluntary restructuring of power, feels like a signal of evolution. The Crown Estate, once seen as a monument of tradition, has become the monarchy's new symbol of adaptation, a cornerstone of continuity reimagined for a more flexible, more responsive future. And yet, beneath the optimism, the kingdom knows this transformation came at a cost. It exposed divisions, severed ties, and brought long simmering rivalries to the surface. But perhaps that was the price of progress, because for the first time in decades, the monarchy didn't wait for change, it made it. With boldness, with risk, and with consequences still unfolding. As the dust settles and a new chapter begins, one thing remains clear: the royal game has changed, and the players will never be the same again. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.